Welcome back, everybody. Let's begin taking a look at some of the different literary devices that we can use to analyze different works of poetry, fiction, drama, and some of these can even be used to analyze and interpret visual arts, such as a painting or a sculpture. So let's begin with allegory. So what is an allegory? An allegory is when a work of art is going to use a narrative. And by a narrative, we mean a story. And what that story is going to do, it's going to convey the author, the poet, right? The playwright, to convey his or her meaning. And that meaning is not going to be explicitly stated. In other words, it's not going to be direct. What the reader is going to have to do, the reader's going to have to do some digging, going to have to do some probing to interpret and to understand it, since it's not going to be directly put out there for the reader, right? So with allegory, the artist is not going to say, in this work, blank is about blank. It's not going to be there. The reader has to do some uncovering and do some legwork. And without that, right, without that probing and digging around and interpreting, what the reader is left with is just the story on the surface, instead of that deep well of understanding and meaning that the artist wants to share with his or her audience. And a good example of an allegorical work is Dune by Frank Herbert. This is an allegory. And a lot of people say, well, hey, Mr. K, I've read this book, I have seen the movie, and boy, I just don't think it's an allegory. So what we have to do is we have to kind of get in here, right? And we have to do some digging and probing around to really understand how an allegory works. So we'll start just jotting some things down, right? We have the Dune planet, of course, which is Arrakis, right? We have spice, melange, right? What else do we see in this novel? We see the different houses, right? The different families, like the House of Atreides, right? All of those different houses. We can find the Fremen, right? The native population that lives on the Dune planet of Arrakis. So now, this is what we see in the narrative, in the story. This is the surface. So now, what can we start to do? We can start to dig. Okay, what is spice? What is melange used for? It's used for space travel. Without melange, without spice, there wouldn't be any travel, right? So now we can start to uncover things. Wow. Right? So now we start to raise some questions. What is used for traveling today? Oil, right? Without petroleum, we don't have gasoline, right? So this, of course, is Dune. This is the host planet where all of the action takes place. Whoa, what could that? What's the meaning behind that? right? The countries of the Middle East that are the oil producing countries, right? So now let's think some more about this. What do the different houses do, right? Right? They come in and they rule Arrakis, even though they have their home planet. What is that like? That's like Western countries, Western powers, and corporations that go into these Middle Eastern countries just for the sake of producing oil to send it back to their home countries. And of course, what are the Fremen? They're the native people who are being oppressed by the different homes that come in, right? The different houses, the different planets that oppress them, and are also being oppressed today by Western powers and the different corporations. And of course, the underlying message here, what Frank Herbert is trying to get in there and explore, share with the reader, is this idea of sovereignty, of freedom for the native people of these countries, which are being exploited by Western powers and Western corporations for oil. Just like the different houses in the Dune universe are being exploited for melange, for spice, for the sake of travel by all of the different houses. Wow. And this is what is really cool about Allegory, is that when people become aware of it and they start to do what? They start to probe and interpret, then what do we uncover? That meaning which is not explicitly stated. And this is what makes works like Dune so rich and so deep. And in case you're curious, yeah, you can enjoy Dune on that surface. In other words, you can enjoy it just over here. It's a really good story. But once we do the digging around and the probing, and we analyze it and we interpret it, then we unlock that really deep, deep meaning, which makes it a timeless work of art. Wow. And this is why it's so important to be aware of these different devices, right, used in literature and other arts, because they make our lives so much richer than just the surface level, right? And people say, well, hey, Mr. K, you know, I understood the novel on the surface level and I'm okay with that. Yeah, I'm okay with that too, but don't you want to not be shallow? Don't you want to have a deep and rich and rewarding life? So as you go through the course of your day-to-day activities, you don't just see the surface of things, but you really start to unlock the deeper nature. You do some probing, and you in essence become a fully aware, a fully educated citizen, right? A fully educated, aware electorate. So a lot of people say, well, why do we have to read literature? And it's because of reasons like that, not just because of, Dune, which sure, go out and pick up a copy and read it, right? But it's become aware that there's so much more going on in life than just what's on the surface. So we'll continue to look at some more literary devices in the next lectures.